Round 5 of the GMT Classical Tournament would determine who will have the best winning chances of winning the triathlon of the 2023 edition, because 4 of the leaders were clashing between each other, which definitely would bring some very heated up and exciting action. Let's have a look at some of the most interesting moments of round 5. We are going to start with the game of Amin Bassem playing against Daniel Bogdan-Diak. The game was rather peaceful and finished one of the earliest. So after c5, knight c6, d5, we eventually got to a position which really resembles to the Grunfeld, with the difference that white has an extra tempo. d4 is necessary, otherwise black just takes the center with e7, e5. E6, c4, now we transpose to some sort of a Catalan. D takes on c4, queen a4, here's an interesting playable move. D takes on c5 is a much more perhaps popular alternative. And here after queen d1, rook d1, bishop takes on c5, white plays knight d2, wants to win the pawn on c4 and claims slightly better position because of the strong bishop on g2. c3, all of this has been played before. Castles, knight b3, bishop e7. White normally chooses here between c4 and knight f to d4. So here the Egyptian grandmaster chose knight e4. Again, knight e4, c takes on d4. White fixes his pawn structure and is thinking about causing black some issues with the development of the queen side, because you see the bishop on c8 can't develop because the pawn on b7 is undefended. So knight e5 is played to stop that problem. Bishop d2, white takes care of the c3 square, black secures the knight on d5 against e4 threat, knight a5, bishop f6, rook c1. All of this already had been played before, so up to this moment the players were basically following other games played at the highest level. b6, knight c6, bishop b7, rook c2. So far the players were following the game of Krishnan Sashikaran playing against Radoslav Wojtaszek last year. Rook f8, and white was simply unable to cause black any real problems, because after king f7, knight e5 check, the position inevitably simplified to an endgame. So after the trade, of course, I mean, white could take on d5 and secure himself a slightly better pawn structure, but it's the obstacle of bishops, which in the end means that this arising endgame is just a draw. The Egyptian grandmaster tried to complicate matters by playing e4, having 2 bishops, but Diak just didn't give white any chances, and after some accurate moves of knight f5, knight e4, here Bassem had to play f4, allowing black to fix the king side with h5, and now finally, after bishop d6, king e8, here the Egyptian grandmaster decided to force matters and fix the game into a draw. Another draw was played between Arjun Erigaisi against Jules Moussard. Here we got, after knight c3, d5, again, yet another Kaspat structure, which is quite a popular setup in the Biel tournament so far. Bishop e7, e3, h6, bishop h4, and here the Frenchman surprised probably his opponent by playing the very rare bishop g4. Now the key idea most likely is that after queen b3, which seems to be the refutation, white is threatening to take on b7, also bishop f6 and win the pawn on d5. Black can sacrifice just the pawn, because queen b7, rook b8 with rook b2 seems to be incredibly dangerous for white because he's underdeveloped. And also, white cannot win the pawn on d5 because knight e5, the bishop on h4 remains under attack, and bishop e7, black just plays knight e7, winning material. So that's why Erigaisi played f3, but that was part of the French champion's plan. Now he played bishop e6, and thanks to this potential weakness on e3, he was able to play very quickly c5, knight c6, getting a very good game for black. After king h1, c takes queen d7, the position remained about level. Queen b3 perhaps was not a good start of a wrong plan for Erigaisi. Rook e8, rook d1, rook c8, and here things started to go slightly wrong for the Indian star. He played a3, knight a5, and queen a2, which couldn't have been a good plan because now the queen on a2 is simply cut off from the game. Here the Frenchman felt a bit ambitious. He played knight c4, eyeing for a fork on e3. Knight f4. Every guy tried to complicate matters. Knight e3, bishop b5. This is not a blunder. White also is winning an exchange. But at the end of the complications, black was slightly better. So Arigasi tried to bring the queen back in the game. And after bishop a5, takes, here, knight e2. Black was tiny, having a very small advantage, but nothing really serious to capitalize. So the Frenchman didn't find any real chances to extract anything out of this position, and draw was agreed very soon. Obviously, one of the most critical games of the round was last year's triathlon championship winner, Le Quang Liem against Yu Yanyi. So these players were, after round 4, currently in the 3rd and 4th place, and the Chinese grandmaster desperately needed the victory, because in case of the victory, he would have still pretty decent chances to climb closer to the leaders, and with a very good tiebreak of winning the Chess 960 tournament, he would have had at least some chances to fight for the top prizes. So here, once again, yet another Carlsbad, bishop g5. This time, Le Quang Liem decided to play bishop b4. Slightly more aggressive continuation, e3, h6, g5, knight e4. This is one of the big ideas of the line. Black weakens his kingside structure, but with c5, queen a5, he usually goes very aggressive at the queen side. Also h5, h4, trying to attack the bishop on g3. There's a lot of theory. Yu here played a very rare move a3, which has not been tested so much. And the point is that after knight c3, white can play queen b3, simply wins back the piece, and yeah, black is probably not very happy with the outcome. So instead, what happened here, bishop takes on c3 was played. Now knight c3 is not very good, because simple queen c2 is possible. As you can see, the pawn on c7 for black drops. He loses all kinds of dynamics. Now instead, black continued with the idea to play h5. So the threat is h4, bishop b5, f6, trap the bishop. f3 seems to be necessary. Knight g3, h takes on g3, queen e7. And here, after king f2, it seems that white is doing all right. The king stands exactly where it should be. And after knight e7, here things started to go wrong for the Chinese grandmaster. Most likely he had to go for c4, ask black what he's going to do, because most likely black wants to castle long, and c4 would probably remove him the possibility to play c6, because then again, after doing this, you don't want to castle long. Either way, it would have been a different game. Here, the Chinese grandmaster play bishop d3, perhaps a little slow. Knight f6, queen f4 check, bishop d7, and queen b4. The idea is pretty good. But the thing is, after b6, he had to opt for the queen trade, most likely. So queen e7, king e7, and consider moves like c4, having probably a balanced position. Also, in the post-game interview, the Vietnamese top grandmaster didn't really know how to properly evaluate this position, but probably it's about level. Now instead, here, the Chinese grandmaster didn't feel the danger. He played knight e2, probably underestimating his position. After the very strong c5 here, white already had to be accurate and take on c5, because after b takes on c5, although black already feels slightly better, black can never castle long. Now instead of this, Yu played queen b2, and after c4, bishop c2, long castle. Now he realized that his counterplay at the queen side is non-existent, because at any moment when white plays a5, black just closes the queen side with b5, and the white king is in danger, because think about moves g4, g takes on f3, or h4, queen d6, get the queen on g3, and from here things started to go, again, incredibly wrong for the Chinese grandmaster. So he tried to trade queens once again, like Wang Liem denied. Rook e1, rook e8, attack the pawn on e3, knight g1, a5 pushing away the queen, king c7, so black is already trying to play queen d6, h4. The position for white is very difficult, and in difficult positions, people tend to make mistakes. e4 was not a good move, but then again, white's position already was quite bad. Of course, Le Quang Liem was very happy to see this move, because it opens white's king, d takes, bishop e4, has to be played, h4. As you can see, white's king is getting open very quickly. And here, yet another mistake, but again, difficult to suggest something better for white. Queen d6, threatening queen g3, and white's position just collapsed very quickly without any resistance. So king g1, a sad move, but difficult to suggest something better. And here, the Vietnamese Grandmaster should have simply played knight g3, as he confessed in the post-game interview. He slightly rushed. He should have thought a little bit more in this position. Then after rook h2, f5, trade the rooks, position the rook on e8, and white's position is simply crumbling because the rook on h2 is unable to help the king, and knight on g3 gives black all kinds of mating ideas. Now instead of this here, the Vietnamese Grandmaster play queen g3, queen g7, queen g3, and maneuver back the queen. But again, he didn't really spoil much of his position, because now he finally picked up the idea of knight g3 and exploiting the first rank weakness of white. After queen h6 first, attacking the rook. Now take the rook here, rook e8. Finally, for the Chinese Grandmaster, this was enough. He stopped the clock because the threat of queen e3 or the back rank exploitation is simply too much, and there's no defense against all kinds of threats. Big victory for the Vietnamese Grandmaster, who was now in the lead of the tournament, scoring 4th victory in 5 rounds. But the most important game of the round was the two leaders, the shared leaders, David Navarra against Vincent Keimer, and you could definitely expect this is going to be an exciting game, and it was. It definitely did not disappoint. After Ruy Lopez, knight f6 show castle, rook e1, here Navarra decided to avoid martial variation, which usually happens if black plays early d5 and knight e5. So a4 is a known way to avoid this. Keimer played b4, d3 here, so we are having a positional struggle. Knight a5, c5, d4. White immediately tries to clarify the situation in the center. The position sort of resembles the Chigorin, because Chigorin knight a5, c5 has been around for a long time, quite a popular system for black. Here, Keimer decided to include c takes on d4 and play bishop b7, and about here his preparation ended. d5 makes sense because this is one of the common ideas of the Ruy Lopez. Knight e7. Navarro confessed after the game he had 2 moves here, knight c4, knight b3. He decided to play knight c4. Takes, rook c, a, b3. And the first critical position of the variation here Keimer played queen a5, something which engines didn't really like. His idea was pretty obvious. He wants to play bishop d8, bishop b6 to bring the bishop in the game. However, this comes at the expense of the unfortunate placement of the queen. Perhaps he had to play something like knight b6 immediately, but then again, the pawn on b4 could be vulnerable in some lines. After bishop e3, bishop d8, rook c1, bishop b6, queen d2 seemed to be the most natural. Knight h4, white was looking for ways to exploit the weakness of the f5 square, because even if black plays g6, white still can proceed to play knight f5, g takes, queen g5 check, so black simply cannot do that. Now, that's why Keimer played a5, so that he can play queen d8 and bring the queen closer to the defenses. Knight f5, queen d8, and another critical position here. Apparently, the strongest move here was f4, which was rejected by both players because both of them suggested rook e8. And seemingly, after f takes on e5, black plays rook e5 and is very happy. Well, they missed simple bishop b5, and unfortunately now this rook has no good retreat squares. There's no checks. Queen b6, you can always play queen f2. White always retains better chances. Rook c1, queen c1, there's no tricks with knight e4, so white would have retained a better position. Now, instead of this, Navarra played the very tempting queen g5, g6, and now he played f4. But this was based on miscalculation, because after e takes on a4, e5, d takes on e5, the Czech Grandmaster wanted to play rook e5, which was his original idea, and only about here he realized before playing rook e5 that it simply meets knight takes on d5, and because of the unprotected rook on c1, he can never capture the knight on d5. And that's why he had to push everything forward, play d6, and pray it works, although he confessed he felt he might be already losing here. Keimer picked up the best move, knight e7 check, king g7 is the critical move, there's no repetition because knight f5 check is king h8, and here, rook takes on e5, of course, is a big mistake, but again, for white it was not easy. He should have perhaps continued knight f5 check, king h8, trade here, and play knight h6, king g7, takes, and try to complicate matters with rook c7, rook e5, rook a5. But it's pretty obvious that black is pressing here because he has two minor pieces for the rook, and the pawn on d6 for white is going nowhere. Now, instead of this, Navarra played rook e5, and here the young German had absolutely stunning idea, try to win the game. If he only could check it from the black's perspective, as you can see, it seems pretty obvious that f6 is the move to be played. But then again, the question is what happens after knight f5 check. You cannot go king g8. This is where the bishop is. King h8, queen h6, that's a mate threat. So g takes on f5 and rook e7. And you just don't see any defense here for black because, once again, there's two kinds of threats here, queen g7, queen h7. And that's the reason why Keimer simply dropped this line. However, he had absolutely stunning way to win this game if he had found incredible rook f7. Now, the point of rook f7 is that bishop takes on f7 is impossible. As you can see, the rook on c1 is not protected. Also, with the bishop on f7, white loses the threats to deliver the mate. So obviously, it's got to be rook takes on f7. Now, the key point is queen b6 check, and black delivers forced mate. I mean, there's two moves, king h1, king f1. King f1 allows black to play bishop g2. The king cannot escape. Check, 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 check. You see, all of this is pretty forced. And now, the most important move, queen check. So you're taking the rook on c1, queen b1 is a mate on the board. King h1 is a different story. It's also a possibility. And now again, the same bishop g2 check. King takes on g2, rook g8 check. King h1 is simply mate on the board. There's no way to escape. Also, king goes here, that's simply a mate on the board, rook g1, queen e3. And king h3 finally is queen e3 check. Here, rook g4 check, king h5, queen h3, mate on the board. So the entire idea of this rook f7 actually is just to gain the square of e3, right? So once again, here, queen b6, king h1, takes, rook g8. As you can see, this critical square is so important because the white rook doesn't protect it. During the live interview, we were discussing this idea immediately, like with queen b6 check here, and now takes on bishop g2, but we did not immediately see what to continue after king h3, as obviously the rook on e7 protects the e3 square. All of this was very difficult to pick up, but apparently here Keimer had another opportunity, which perhaps was more human. He could have played rook takes on c4. Now the key idea is that after rook takes on c4, f6, knight f5 check, he has access to king g8, because the white's bishop no longer stands on c4. Now queen h6, g takes on f5, rook e7. Now he can play rook f7, and after the capture, queen h7, king e6. White probably has to play rook d4 to strand the black queen on d8 against the queen d7 check. But once again, it's pretty obvious, even with the naked eye, it's black who is pressing here. It's either f3 or bishop e4, two strong pieces here for black, giving him better chances, but white is still not lost. Now, let's jump back again to this position from the white's perspective, because after queen e5 check here, Keimer played f6, and his idea was that queen f4, he's going to play queen b6 check, queen e5, queen c5, queen e5, and position the queen here on the central square, stopping, obviously, first rook d8, and then queen c5, queen e5, stopping any white's threats. Now, here Navarro found a very strong response, queen d4, limiting black's piece domination, and it just was very unclear who is even playing this for the win. Rook c7 was the only move for Keimer. D takes on c7 is impossible. The queen on d4 is hanging. That's why rook e1 was played, also protecting against rook takes on e7 threat. Rook d7. Now rook e6 protects the pawn on d6. And finally, Navarra took on f4, as black no longer has access to the e5 square. Bishop a6 was a very human move. Bishop a6. Perhaps white continued with bishop d5. Really difficult to tell at this point. Queen b6 check. Queen e3, strong response by Navarra. King f2. And now it was very unclear how black is going to continue. But because at every given moment, rook takes on d6 meets knight f5 check. G takes on f5, queen g3, and white is out of the danger because that's a check, and he simply takes on d6, or after king h6 just delivers perpetual check. So that's why here Keimer tried to postpone his decision making until the next time control, because this was move 38, h4. He always could have played queen h7. This is a move he did not definitely want to make in time trouble. But after h5, queen c5, black simply ran out of time. So at move 40, Keimer had to make this very brave decision to play queen h7. After trade, king e3, now suddenly white is very active, advances with the king, and it was quite difficult to understand who is even playing this for the win. So rook a6 was another opportunity for Keimer, with the idea after king d4 sacrificed exchange, play here, and after rook d5 go for activity at the king side. And it was pretty difficult to evaluate from afar who would win this pawn race, but Navarra had calculated it all, and in the post-game interview he showed some very interesting drawing lines for both players. Keimer decided this is not the way to go. He played rook f8, king d4, king f7, king d5. White centralizes his pieces, and after rook e8, here Navarra found another beautiful shot, knight c6. Now the point is, after rook e6, knight e6, white is still feeling pretty safe. Knight c5, king c6, this pawn is moving forward. Here actually it was the young German who had to be accurate, and he had to organize counterplay at the king side after g5. Very accurate play by white, king c6, threatening to play knight c7. And here Keimer had nothing better to do than to take it, knight c7 check, and agree to a repetition. Why this is a draw? Because after knight c7, king f7 is impossible because king b6 traps the rook. Keimer could have continued with king c8, but after knight c5, once again he has to go back and repeat the position, because let's say f5 would be a big mistake because of b7, king d8, king d6, and he has to give away the rook on d7. An amazing draw in the end, which means that we can see the results of round 5. Le Quang Liem scores the only victory of the round, which allows him to jump in the overall lead. David Navarra wins and Keimer's a draw, perhaps a slight disappointment for the German player. Still, very exciting game. Daniel Bogdandiak against Amin Bassem, Arjun Rugais against Jules Massart finished in a draw, rather peaceful games. Here are the new rankings after round 5. Last year's triathlon winner Le Quang Liem is now back in charge, leading the tournament. Again, 4 victories in 5 rounds. Incredible performance by the Vietnamese Grandmaster. David Navarra, Vincent Keimer currently share the second, third place. Navarra has the better tiebreak because he finished in the 3rd place in the Chess 960 tournament, which serves as a tiebreaker. The action comes back on Tuesday at 2 p.m. Central European Summer Time with more exciting games. 2 more games still to go. Very difficult to predict who is going to win this. 3 very serious contesters for the top prize of 10,000 Swiss francs. Come back to watch it live here in Biel and enjoy this.